In the grand scheme of human existence, 6 years is nothing. It represents 8.3% of the average human life. We see companies grow, shrink, disappear and reappear, but in my 20-ish years of watching and paying attention to the moto industry, I've not seen many brands make huge leaps in such short time frames. KTM have kind of done it a few times, once when they were reborn in the 90s and again when the Supercross revolution happened with Roger DaCosta and Ryan Dungey. Some make steady progress over time, others have flash-in-the-pan explosions that result in them scrabbling to keep up, but Royal Enfield is a very different thing. For somewhere around 50 years, they had a business model built around one bike, almost zero development, and national pride based on nostalgia built the company into an unknown giant in Western markets. Selling nearly 1 million bikes a year in India alone is great business, but the reality is that Royal Enfield and their bikes were living on borrowed time. A bike designed in the 50s being your main product can't last forever. And so they began the process of a new era. Design was moved to the UK, a host of great skilled and talented engineers were hired, and slowly they set to work. It was always going to be a balancing act. If they transformed too quickly, they would alienate the bullet-loving Indian market. But producing Indian-centric bikes for the West doesn't really work. We ride differently, have different road networks and different road speeds. India is a country of beautiful riding where highways just stop, where around a mountain road might be a landslide, a cow, or a car on the wrong side of the road. People ride for every reason, to move the fridge, to get to work, and for fun. They ride in gear, they ride in safety thongs, and meshing that with this, well, that's tricky. The first Himalayan was a fine bike, but its main feather in its cap was its price. It was jaw-droppingly cheap, and because of that you could forgive the mediocre brakes and the slow engine or the subpar riding position. In India, it worked well as a bike to get you places, regardless of your skill or experience. For me, the Himalayan brand is cemented in that moment, a fine bike that doesn't cost much and will get you into the places you want to go with minimal fuss. Except here is the plot twist that I've been foreshadowing. That's not what the Himalayan is anymore. The first words that come to mind are that calling this a Himalayan is almost a disservice to the bike that they've built. It carries some ideology over from the previous model, but the leap forward from that bike to this bike is stunningly huge. Royal Enfield might be able to build on the coattails of others, but they still have to make the leap, and holy crap, did they leap like Jonathan Edwards. The small bike budget adventure bike market has been a little bit underwhelming for a really long time. I think a lot of us were crying out for something that was a little bit better. Every comment section, every thread on ADV Rider was filled with people saying, we need something smaller and more capable for off-road. The monstrous Indian market up until now has posed this really nice low-hanging fruit for Western brands, a bit because Bajaj heavily invested in KTM to rescue them from the previous bankruptcy scandal. BMW also joined forces with TVS, and we got the 290 and 390 KTMs and the 310 GS from that. And all three of those bikes were okay as adventure bikes, but mostly I think they were found wanting. They didn't work the best if you rode them in a Western enduro style. If you sat down and mash along on them, they work fine. However, for a lot of people, that isn't how they ride or what they want to do with their bike. And if you gave me the choice of a T7 or a KTM 890 or a 310 GS, there's no question what I'm choosing. Even with the CF Moto 450, I don't think this choice was tackled. CF Moto built a smaller version of a bigger bike that is really built in that European or Japanese style. That means that bikes in that mold have a high ceiling of performance, but they are often big, tall, top-heavy, powerful, and the better you are technically, the better they ride. Some do it better than others, but for this purpose, we can kind of throw a blanket over all of them. And here begins the genius that I think Royal Enfield need credit for, and ultimately why it makes such a fantastic little adventure bike. The new Himalayan is a blend. I think it's the only blend. You can ride it both ways, from the showroom floor, and it works very well. I don't ride like an Indian, I stand up, I use the clutch to control the power, I come from riding enduro, and I relish riding somewhat technical terrain. The Himi has a near perfect adventure riding position that's not too upright nor too cantered. It puts you in a great position on the pegs, it's slim between the legs, and the control feels great. They learnt from the world's weakest front brake. the clutch has a good feeling, and the handlebars look odd but feel superb. Because of that, you're in a good position to ride the bike. It handles really well. It's relatively light on the trail, it's flickable, precise, it's fun. I found it so enjoyable to ride because I could hop off things, could do little trail jumps, and I was able to hustle along at a pace that I really don't think you need to exceed. It does have a little balance quirk that I'll come to later, but the base here is so solid. If Royal Enfield built the CF Moto style bike for the domestic market in India, they would have tanked it. If you're a sit down and mash through it kind of rider, it's got you covered. It does this very well, and in some situations, let's be honest, well, that's the best way to get the job done. Rivers this deep deserve respect, and the Himi made it easy. The size, the bike not being so big physically, is a huge plus. It does carry a couple of drawbacks, but in general, its manageability compared to most adventure bikes is massive. The intimidation factor is low, but the ceiling of performance is pretty high. Striking the balance between two markets is a good idea. I was stoked that the new bike felt so good in the chassis, but the engine was going to be the make or break of the 450. If it lost the 411's ability for anyone to ride it, it would be a disaster. My best friend Joe rode one around the Himalayas as a total beginner. The new engine needs to plod and never stall like a tractor, but it also needs to make some power because crossing the world that slowly takes a while, and it could just be a ton more fun. I have subscribed to the thought process that twin cylinders are smoother and nicer travel bikes than singles. I was wrong, and I'm happy to admit it. The Himalayan is like melted butter. Smooth, with surprisingly strong mid-range that keeps pulling for a lot longer than you'd expect. It eats long hills without frantic gear changing, it revs out cleanly, it doesn't vibe in the bars, and still has that beautiful low-end single chug that nearly everyone loves. Need to drive up a steep hill, and the Himi crushes it. It's hard to lose traction or momentum, which makes exploring easier. It's hard to stall too, but because it's also free revving and has a wide power range, you can keep pulling up hills. I didn't find myself in the wrong gear often or in a situation where I feel like it's being over-revved. You can be a little trialsy too, you can be a little rowdy, and all of that is bloody great. It's not a single cylinder in the mold that you're thinking of. I've never ridden a single cylinder like it. I'd go as far as to say that we don't need more small bore twin cylinders if singles can feel like this. It's a great engine to live with, and the more I rode it and I understood the bike, the more I enjoyed it. There were times where a little more power would absolutely have been nice for me, but mostly that's for a little power slide or a wheelie. For actually covering ground and getting from A to B, it is right on the money. One of the previous weak points was the suspension. The old stock stuff was ultra simple and actually valved pretty firm. It kind of worked well on the road, but it was hyper limited. Those days are gone. Showa make the forks and they work decently well. It's not a magic carpet, but it's not getting bucked around, and mostly it's doing the job by being safe, having some bottoming resistance and letting you feel the ground and tires. It's not going to blow you away, but it's also not going to kill you. Also on the checklist of improvement is the user experience. It's hard to believe that this bike was built by the same brand that built the last one. The brakes are now fantastic. The little TFT is simple but pretty easy to use, the lights are decent, and all the switchgear feels fantastically more premium than it did. In the performance mode with the rear ABS turned off, the front ABS was also stellar. Occasionally it poked its head in for a chat, but it's right there in terms of performance and you can live with it.
Well, that's the downhill.
Before we go any further, let's come back to the price. In 2016, the original Himi was good for the price. It was around £4,000. The new 450 starts at £5,750, and the version we have is £500 more with the fun paint and the tubeless wheels. On our tubeless wheels, we fitted some Mitas Enduro Trail XT Pluses. This isn't our control tire, but for this bike and the type of riding we had planned to do with it, it's the perfect tire. Our standard control tire is the Enduro Trail Plus that you can see in our recent 1300 GS review. Now, as well as that, we had some Krieger OS 6 on the stock crash bars to carry tools and spares. Ultimately, what we're talking about is real budget bikes, and we're talking about them as being objectively good, not just good for the money. The conversation and the competition has completely changed in this segment of the market. We've arrived at the section where I desperately try to prove to you that my love letter to Royal Enfield isn't just about getting my friends a pay rise or lining my wallet. There are some things that do stand out as worth knowing for you if you want to buy one of these. Firstly, it struck me when I first jumped on the 450 that the balance feels odd front to rear, like it's a little low or steep at the front. The main way I found this manifests is in lifting the front wheel at any sort of speed. It's possible, but you really need to get it right, and it does take a ton of effort. Floating the front wheel over holes or puddles at 40 kilometers an hour isn't a natural, effortless thing like you might find on the CF Moto 450. The lack of total power hinders this as well, but is definitely not the sole cause. I'd like to take more time to play with the setup because I think it'd make the bike safer in the long run. Handling wise, I never really found an issue with it. In extreme circumstances, if you really pushed the speed through some rocks, it got a little shimmy that felt like it was a bit on nose, but it's a thing to note rather than a thing to complain about. It's not unstable and head shaky in the way a KTM 890 can be. Because Royal Enfield set out to make the Hemi smallish, it's also a cold bike. The wind protection is limited, the seat is a bit thin on the foam, and I can feel the base, and as a large human, it's a tiny bit cramped. It's not horrific, but it's not luxury. The controls on the bars are also quirky. It's got some fat grips going on and some fat levers. Maybe that's an India thing, but I didn't hate them, surprisingly. The ABS loves to turn itself on too, and for riding off-road with pace, having it on full mode is a scary life choice. It's also a little quirky as to when you can change the mode, but that's about making a habit with the ABS system more than anything. I'd like it if I could work it on the fly, as I regularly found myself pulling away, remembering it's crap, and then stopping to change the mode. I started this video with the point that I've not seen such a dramatic leap in the quality a bike has improved by very often. Most of these things are incremental, but Royal Enfield does not feel like it's incremental. It feels like a huge step, and I think a lot of us probably need to start looking at them with a different lens. The new bike will probably have the same improvements across the range and are probably still going to represent huge value for money. The Hemi is a unique thing, cutting its own path through the moto market, but doing it at a high level with a lot of fun and not a ton of expense. If you're shopping in this price bracket for an adventure bike, you would be crazy not to try one. Good job, Royal Enfield.